Welcome back to the Tiga Tactics podcast, a show about self-defense for civilians by civilians. We discuss all things personal protection, including martial arts, combat sports, and street combatives. Our resident martial arts nerds, MANs, include co-founder of Tiga Tactics and holder of black belts in 9 different styles, Dr. Conrad Bui.
Hello, hello, everybody.
Our other co-founder is not joining us today, but I am your other co-host, retired Army Special Forces soldier and champion obstacle course racing athlete, Evan Ultra-OCR Man Perperis. And that's the second time I got to call myself retired on air. Very
Are you
excited.
getting used to it yet?
It still feels kind of weird. It's weird to have something like part of your identity for 20 years and then it's not part of your identity. Even
Yeah,
though I didn't really quite, I feel like I always kind of kept it at arm's distance, but still feels a little weird.
sure. And just to say you're a retired man, you must feel so old.
It does feel weird because like I'm not. I mean, yeah, I'm low 40s, right? So and I just go right back to other. I basically just picked up a new career anyway. So yeah,
Exactly. You're not that old, but
yeah,
you can now have that title retired.
I know, yeah. Now I can make excuses for when people beat me up in BJJ. Speaking
Right,
of,
exactly.
speaking
Yeah,
of, today we're gonna do a deep dive into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and
right.
I'm a blue belt. I've been training for a couple years, and Conrad is a what degree black belt are you?
I'm a second degree black belt, and I've been training almost 20 years in
Yeah.
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
All right, so let's. I think most people know what it is, but why don't you give us like a quick history lesson, and then we can talk a little bit more about it and some of the benefits and drawbacks and all that stuff.
All right. Well, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I would say, would basically be a branch of judo. The instructor for uh, Helio Gracie, as well as his brother, uh, they learned from a Japanese instructor who was basically a judo instructor. And back in those days, judo, jujitsu, it was very interchangeable. And so they went with the jujitsu moniker, the jujitsu identity, and so it just stuck. And originally, when the Gracies brought it over to the U.S., it was called Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and there's still schools that call themselves Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And then, of course, I think there's some copyright things happening, and so certain people couldn't use the word Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, so they created Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and so that's where BJJ comes from. And nowadays, most schools will use the word Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu,
Kind of
and here we
real
are.
quick funny aside when the army adopted Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Gracie Jiu-Jitsu for their combatives, they similarly they changed the names of a bunch of the moves. So like the Americana is called the uh bent armbar, and then the Kimura is the reverse bent armbar. So they avoided those like uh copyright issues and claims to proprietaryship, whatever. So
Right. Yeah. So I think not just in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu versus Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, I've seen it in other martial arts as well too. So and it just over and over again. I'm sure not just in martial arts, but maybe in other whether that's professions or hobbies as well too. I'm sure things like this happen all the time.
yeah, people got to make their
And
mark.
so yes, yes. And so I remember first hearing about the Gracies long before the UFC. Well, for sure, we'll talk about UFC 1. I think UFC 1 changed the course of history or the course of martial arts for many people, myself included,
Absolutely.
especially. But I first heard of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu through some magazines, and they wrote a few articles, and I remember reading their articles and just looking, this just looks like judo. They're throwing people on the ground and they jump on an arm bar, and I thought, okay, I guess this looks just like judo. And then they start doing the Gracie challenge. Do you remember the Gracie challenge?
I mean, I don't remember when it was going on, but I've read about it in hindsight. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. They would just basically say, hey, we challenge any martial artist, anybody, anywhere, anytime, basically. And so they took up a lot of challenge matches, and eventually they put it together in a video. And I remember purchasing the video back in the, gosh, I want to say late 80s, early 90s. And yeah, they were putting people down. And I remember thinking, okay, these are just run-of-the-mill martial artists. This would never happen to anyone good like me. Or the people I trained with were way too good for this. But yeah, they were tearing through like kung fu fighters and Kempo fighters, karate fighters, even bodybuilders and wrestlers they would go up against. Uh, and yeah, I remember during that time, okay, their formula was basically take them down. We don't know how to fight on the ground, and then they would submit you. And so, and again, I thought, these are just your run-of-the-mill martial artists. What's the big deal with this still? And then finally, UFC one came along, and that was back in 1993. I remember I was still in chiropractic school. I remember watching it with a bunch of friends, and wow, yeah, at that time I thought, okay, this crazy jujitsu stuff is legit. Do you remember watching UFC one at all?
Not again, not I remember being in high school and someone talking about it, and I don't remember what year that was, but it was mid 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember them talking about the matchups, and I thought we were talking about like a fiction thing at first because they were like, "Oh yeah, sumo versus whatever versus Savate," and I was like, "What?" And then they were talking about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I was like, "What even is that?" And a couple years later, when I tried to find a martial arts gym that taught Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu on Long Island, and let's see, it was early 2000s. You couldn't I couldn't find one, which is kind of
Mm-hmm.
think And if you, I've done some research since then into UFC, and there's like some people like, oh, UFC one was fixed and blah blah blah. And it's like, well, it wasn't fixed. The Gracies had done this so many times off camera, and with camera and the part of the Gracie challenge, they knew what was going to happen essentially.
Right.
I mean, stuff could have gone wrong, but they generally knew what was what was about to happen. And the one thing I remember weird about UFC one is they give Helio Gracie an award at UFC one. And I was like, how can you give an award to a new organization? I remember being very confused watching that in hindsight. And now, like now that I've done a little more research, it's like, oh, okay, now it makes sense. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and I remember I was in my 20s, my early 20s when this happened in 1993, and I remember reading the magazine articles about it. I remember even seeing some ads from the Gracies looking for applicants to fight in this Ultimate Fighting Championship, and it was literally no rules. I mean, again, I don't think just like what we discussed about competition
Yeah.
during our competition podcast, there wasn't any eye gouging or biting allowed, but basically you could strike to the groin, you could do just about anything else, and there was no requirement for any type of pads. It was basically as blood sport as you could get it, and I
I
remember.
love I love those first five UFCs. I love them. It's such like a snapshot in time of like the crazy world of martial arts. I just love it. I think it's so interesting to watch.
I agree. It's so primal, like literally Mortal Kombat, the
Yes.
video game.
Yeah.
It's like karate versus Kempo versus Savate versus sumo versus judo versus kickboxing versus Muay Thai versus Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And it was literally like the characters from those video games.
Yeah,
And
it's like Street
I,
Fighter too. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I remember, watching UFC one, and then I thought, okay, this Hoist Gracie guy, he'll be lucky if he gets past one or two, but he's not gonna win this thing, because these guys were legit. The first person he fought was a boxer. I think his name is Art,
Yeah.
and
Art Jimerson. Yeah.
yeah, Art Jimerson, and he had solid boxing credentials. He
Yeah,
wasn't
I
just
did.
some guy they found at some boxing gym. He knew his stuff. But sure enough, and it was interesting. He came in with one hand glove, and that was interesting. I thought, wow, okay, what's the other hand for? When it got serious, I guess he can punch him with a serious hand. But
But I
yeah,
think
but
he did it to prevent. He was worried about breaking his hand on Hoist's face, essentially. So he's protecting good hand, my understanding. Then he was going to use the other hand to grab and control. Well, that
I
was the
see.
intent. It didn't work.
Okay. It didn't work. Yeah. As soon as they hit the ground, you could just see that he was out of like a fish out of water, basically. And I remember thinking, okay, Hoist Gracie got lucky. He won that one. His second match was up against Ken Shamrock, and
Mhm.
Ken Shamrock just destroyed Pat Smith. And I actually knew of Pat Smith because he's from Colorado. And he used to compete in tournaments, and I would see him at the tournaments. He's a big boy, and he actually competed in the Sabaki tournament. That was no pads, full contact knockdown karate. You just couldn't punch to the face. That's all. But you could full on kick to the face. You could punch to the body, but no punching to the face. That was the only rule that you can do. But you could kick to the legs, uh, anywhere in the body. You could knee as well too. I don't think elbows were legal, but but it wouldn't make sense elbowing somebody in the chest anyways. But so yeah, so he was legit. He fought in those tournaments, and at that time, Ken Shamrock fought him in the opening rounds as well too. So Ken Shamrock took him down and got him in a leg lock, and uh, and so when Ken Shamrock was gonna fight Hoist Gracie, I thought, oh man, that's it. Hoist is done because Ken had some grappling experience, and man, you could tell this dude was roided out. I mean, he
Oh
just
yeah.
looked jacked like a bodybuilder.
There was so much juiced up athletes in those early UFCs. It's insane.
And I gotta say, why not? Why not? I mean, let them get juiced up. Maybe there should be a fighting organization that allows juicing. I would just love to see where that goes. Just these roided up people. And we know that juicing also changes your mindset, your mentality as well too. So that would be an interesting organization to watch, actually.
I mean,
Uh, uh,
there's in the bodybuilding world, there's essentially you can use drugs in like the IFBB, what like Mr. Olympia and Arnold Schwarzenegger and Ronnie Coleman are in, or were
mhm.
in, and then they have natural organizations. A
Okay.
lot of the pushback you get for combat sports is because you're punching other people in their face. There's
Right.
some concern with like, oh, now we're giving people an unfair advantage, but if you're letting everyone juice,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, there's like a famous SNL skit from I think the 90s about the all roid Olympics, and the guy who like goes to lift the weights essentially stands up and his arms stay attached to the bar and he's like bleeding everywhere. It's pretty funny.
I remember that.
But there was like like in the last year, someone announced they were gonna make an all steroid Olympics. I don't know if it went
Oh,
anywhere. Any
wow. Interesting.
anyway,
Okay.
yeah,
Well, yeah. Back to the UFC one single elimination tournament. And what was also really cool about this tournament was it was open weight as well too. And so uh there was a Savate fighter, Gerard, I think was his first name. He fought a sumo wrestler as well too, and uh, kicked him in the face and knocked out a tooth. Actually, I was like, wow. And so Hoist went up against Ken Shamrock, and yeah, I thought, oh, he's gonna lose because Ken's just roided out. He's so huge, and he knows submission grappling, and sure, but again, Hoist jumped on him and choked him out, actually quite quickly. And so I thought, oh wow, okay. And so Hoist faced the Savat fighter for the finals, and the Savat fighter, I think he fought a Kempo fighter uh, to advance to the final round after he fought the sumo wrestler. And uh, yeah, and again, I thought, okay, well, by that time, the Savat fighter, I think he had a busted hand
yeah, he broke his
and
hand on
maybe a
someone's face.
busted foot.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember one of my friends watching it with me. He wasn't a real hardcore martial artist, but he was into martial arts. He just said, wow, look at this Hoist Gracie guy. He came to the finals and he doesn't even look touched up at all. And I thought, yeah, I know. He's probably gonna win now because he's really fresh. and the other guy's busted up, busted hand, busted foot. It's not gonna be a pretty sight. Yeah, sure enough, Hoist gets it to the ground and chokes him out and wins UFC one. And I really believe any martial artist who's honest with themselves did a lot of soul searching that night.
100%. I think, we've talked about Bruce Lee on this podcast before. I think the two biggest, in my opinion, events in like martial arts, modern martial arts history is like Bruce Lee, like because like we've talked about with you and Patrick. I mean, there's just so many people who are influenced into the martial arts because of him. And then I
Mhm.
think the second one is UFC one. Like it's just blowing the doors off of um pure striking arts and being like, well, the enemy has a vote. You need to be able to know how to grapple as well, even if
Right.
it's not your primary sport. Or
Exactly.
also,
Exactly.
side note, I just Googled the steroid games thing. It's called
Uh,
the Enhanced Games. It was supposed to take place in 2024. It has been pushed back to 2025, and it does include combat sports. So we,
somebody beat us to it. Darn it.
we will see what we. I don't know what combat sports. We will see what that looks like in the future. Hopefully.
Yeah. I'm curious to see what that's going to look like. So, very interesting. Uh, back to the UFC. Yeah, I think at that time, as far as martial artists go, all eyes were on Gracie Jiu Jitsu back in those days. I was like, wow, I think we need to learn this. And of course, Hoist came back in UFC 2, and that was even a bigger tournament. And he won that one. And I really like UFC 2 because that was like a video game. They had Muay Thai fighters, they had judo fighters, they had a fighter from Japan, the full contact karate style fighting. They had a kung fu guy. They had yeah, kickboxers, traditional martial artists. They even had a ninjutsu a person as well too. So I really like UFC too. I thought that was a really cool UFC one. Cool UFC also. Of course, UFC one was the foundation, very pivotal. But UFC two was really fun.
Yeah. So how long after, oh, real quick, my favorite thing about UFC one, my instructor told me this and I went back and rewatched it was he's like, yeah, go watch it. It's all white to blue level moves. And I was like, no. So I went back and watched UFC one in the last 2 years, and it was all like the most basic white to blue Brazilian
Yes.
Jiu-Jitsu curriculum moves. And I was just shocked at like again how well they work on someone who doesn't know grappling. It was just like, essentially doing what you want to them.
Yes. So while we're on that subject, uh, it's true when you go watch UFC one, UFC two, UFC three and four as well. Too very basic grappling. There's none of this sophisticated leg drags and barambolos, spider guard, or any of those movements. It's just very basic things, and that's why I appreciate rolling with the white belts. I I appreciate that because that brings me back to the fundamentals and
Mm,
just like if I was on the street and I wound up grappling somehow, I'll probably be grappling a white belt-ish kind of person. And so if all you're doing is training against purple belts, brown belts, black belts, and you're the sophistication of your movements is pretty intense, just like in any art, whether that's Muay Thai, Kali, you're sparring with sticks, or grappling. As you get better, you kind of go deeper down that rabbit hole, if you will, and you're just countering each other's sophisticated techniques.
yeah.
And it's important to remember how to grapple with white belts, and so that's why I appreciate training with white and blue belts.
I've heard people say that blue belt is for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu versus everyone else, and then purple, brown, and black is for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu versus Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
I agree. I would agree with that for sure.
Yeah. So when after UFC one did you start training? Like what's the gap there?
Oh, probably 90. Probably about 8 years.
Okay.
It's 7 years, 7, 8 years.
Yeah, and
It
for our
would be
listeners, it's not like UFC one happened and now there's a BJJ gym on every corner. Like it was
right.
still like really exclusive. It was hard to find, and you
Yeah.
slowly had people. Uh, you once the demand signal started appearing, then people started slowly coming over and teaching and etc. So
Right, right. I
it's pretty
remember
close.
back in the day, they would let blue belts teach. You know, if you had a blue belt, you could go out there and you could start teaching because, like what you said, it was hard to find a teacher. I remember my teacher when I first started, he was a second-degree black belt. I was like, oh my goodness, there's like only a handful of these guys here in this area. And so nowadays, there's just black belts all over the place. But back in those days when I started, yeah, there was just a handful of people who were degreed black belts
Mhm.
at that time.
So, uh, what are the? Yeah, again, I think everyone knows what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is, essentially grappling and joint manipulations and chokes and stuff like that. What do you see as the big benefits for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
All right, why don't we ping pong it back and forth? I'll give a benefit. I'm sure you've got some benefits
Oh yeah,
that
yeah,
yeah, a ton of them. We'll just so I would say the first benefit would be training against resistance.
yes,
I think jujitsu, the coolest thing about Brazilian jiu-jitsu and wrestling and judo, well, maybe not wrestling and judo as much as Brazilian jiu-jitsu, because I believe Brazilian jiu-jitsu is a little bit safer than judo and wrestling because those two other arts, judo and wrestling, start on the feet and there's more potential for injury. Um, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, although we do start on the feet, sometimes I feel like, oh man, this guy is dangerous on his feet. He could hurt me, taking me down. I'll just put my foot on his hip and pull guard. And now we've hit the ground and it's a lot safer. It's an art where you could go you could go literally 100% and still be pretty safe. And that I believe that resistance uh, really builds your skills because you're learning under pressure. You're learning with something that really imprints on your psyche.
yeah,
It's almost like touching a hot stove. You know not to touch that hot stove again. Versus like someone just telling you, "Oh, that stove is hot. Don't touch it." You're like you don't have any real respect for it. But when you're in that situation, that imprint really goes deeper. So I think that resistance training in a safe way that's probably one of the biggest benefits of training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Over to you.
yeah.
What's one a benefit you think about?
Yeah. As well with that resistance, the when I see joint locks in other systems or other styles, my litmus test is always like, would this work in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? And if it
Hmm.
doesn't work, or if I haven't seen it in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or it won't work in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I'm like, well, this probably won't work against someone fully resisted. Because even when you're like, I've done in the karate training I did, we like I was still holding back a little bit, right? Like I'm not trying to knock the guy's head off. I'm making contact, but I'm not like
Right,
obliterating him.
right,
I think when you grapple with some people, there are some people who they are literally at 100%. They are like you can feel it. You can feel them flexing on everything. You're like, "Ooh, this
mm,
isn't, you know." Um, I'd say another one, physical fitness. I think it's the best. Um, One of the best cardio workouts as far as like some of the martial arts. I feel like sometimes you go to some styles and some gyms and your workouts like so-so. Whenever I finish a roll in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or a series of rolls, I'm always like, man, that was a good workout. Like I feel accomplished. I feel more fit. So that's easy one. Back over to you. I got plenty more where that came from. Go for it.
yeah, back to the workout section. I think it's a full body thing. It's one of those after a good session, your whole body is fatigued. It's not like just your upper
Yes.
body or your legs or something or your lungs. Everything is fatigued. Yeah, so I totally think that too. Another point would be it's an honest art. In other words, there's no lying. There's some arts where you can kind of wear your uniform and put on this air of mysticism, like oh yeah, I do this, I do this. You'll crumble and you'll just fall to the ground. And there's no real way of really knowing if that is a fact. But in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's an honest thing. You go and try it, and it works sometimes. It doesn't work sometimes. It works most of the time. Yeah, you know very quickly. It's what will work for you, what's higher percentage for you, and if it doesn't work, how to troubleshoot those things. In some arts where there's none of that resistance, people start making things up,
Mm,
and then they start believing.
hmm.
Being an honest art, I think, is a great benefit of training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You got anything else?
Yeah, funny you say that because I got my karate black belt before I got my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu blue belt, and I didn't feel it's kind of weird. I didn't feel like a karate black belt until I had my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu blue belt. Because like, I was a karate black belt, but then I'd go to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class and people would just tie me into a pretzel, and I just like I was like, well, if like, if a blue belt takes me down, like it's over. A blue belt or higher takes me down, it's over. So once I got my blue belt, and then really it was a couple of months after that, once I like felt comfortable in it, because I feel like once I got it initially, I still felt like kind of a fraud, even though it'd taken me a while to get there. Once I kind of felt like that's the correct belt I'm supposed to be wearing. So when you say that confidence and that honesty of the art, I it definitely resonates with me. Another one is fun. Again, kind of picking the easy ones here, but it's just a lot of fun. I have a ton of fun every time. Even if I don't want to go to class at the beginning, by the end of the roll, by the end of the day, I'm always like, oh, this was definitely the right decision. I had a great time. So, um, and it's cool. It's just a lot of fun and cool to learn different moves and be able to, like you said, keep it honest and pressure test them. Back to you.
Yeah, yeah, and with that fun, you're having fun with other people, and it's generally most schools I've been to. It's a great community. Everyone's very supportive. I remember going into the Muay Thai Brazilian Jiu Jitsu school for the first day, and I remember coming from a traditional martial arts background. I thought, oh, I'll go in there and these guys are dragging their knuckles on the ground and they're grunting at you and they're just all testosterone and they want to smash you, but that's really not the case. People are very supportive, they're very nice, and it's a great environment. For my last one I'm going to throw out there, I think there's a lot of correlation between lessons you learn on the mat and lessons in life.
Mm.
There's so many. I could talk about this for hours, but let me just give you one. One lesson on the mat would be balance, right? If when you're on the mat, let's say you're on top in side control, and you're trying to smash that person's face, getting them to turn their face away from you with a shoulder pressure. And maybe if you're doing too much and you're coming over their body too much, they can just turn you and reverse that position very easily because you overdid it. But then if you don't have enough pressure, well, then they can just escape and replace their guard or move to another position. So just like life, it's about balance. For example, work. When we work, you don't want to overdo it where you're burned out and you're just ruining your relationship, ruining your health. And at the same time, you don't want to just chill and not give any effort to work. It's a fine balance. So I see that correlation in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well as in a lot of concepts in life with that balance there.
Yeah, agreed. And I think again teaches you a lot of martial arts teach you this, but I feel like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu sometimes even more the value of like persistency and consistency, and
Mm,
it's humbling. Because there are a lot of days like you go in there and you just get smashed, especially if as a beginner, right? It teaches you to be humble and nice to people, and reminds you that it's a long journey, and you got to keep showing up if you want to get better. Um,
right. There's something else would be another life lesson learned from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is nothing works all the time.
yeah.
It might be high percentage for you, but nothing works all the time. So same thing in life. Maybe the way you want to make up with your husband or wife. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And since we know nothing works all the time, another thing that we learn in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is have a plan B. So,
Yeah.
one of the first things most Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu schools teach would be the scissor sweep from closed guard. All right, so you try the scissor sweep. It works great when you're just practicing with each other. When you go to roll, as soon as you open your guard, bam, they just pass your guard, and now you
Yeah.
got nothing. You're not sweeping nobody, and now you're just trying to get replace your feet back in, or as we say, replace your guard back in. So now you tried for plan A, you gotta have a plan B. So I think that in life, very similar too. You might have a way that you're trying to save money, and then all of a sudden, boom, something pops up. You got to have a plan B, or at least know enough to flow to the next plan. And
Yeah.
so Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a great way to learn that as well too.
Yeah, and the last one I'll throw out, and I feel like we can probably go back and forth for this for I don't know, probably another hour talking about it, but
Right.
effectiveness is kind of one I'll just throw out there. We kind of touched on that with UFC one, it being effective. When we did the deep dive on Army combatives, we think we mentioned a little bit there. One of the reasons the Army chose effectiveness or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as like a big component of their combative system was because um, in a you can teach someone relatively quickly, and they can significantly dominate someone who's not trained in that art.
Mhm.
Versus punching, striking. There's always a quote unquote a puncher's chance.
Right.
So it's effective for that. And I was actually just talking to one of the guys I trained some bladed arts with, and I've been saying this for the last couple of years, but this is the first time I heard someone who's like specifically very blade focused say it. And he's also an FMA dude. He's like, yeah, I recommend that everyone have grappling in their repertoire, at least a blue belt level. He's like, because a lot of like knife work is essentially that has a very large grappling component because you're going to be fighting over the blade, whether you're the one with the blade or the bad guy's the one with the blade. Either way, you're gonna have to manipulate someone's body and control them. So, um, not only for that, that's obviously the extreme, but then also like someone's being unruly at a party and you need to control them, right? Like I can take someone down relatively safely and control them, like we were talking about with that top control, side control, etc. Like if you've been grappling for a while, you can maintain that mount on someone who doesn't know what they're doing relatively easily, despite having a pretty big size differential. So yeah,
Right. I agree. I think every modern day martial artist, they need to add grappling to their repertoire, whether
agreed,
that's
agreed.
wrestling, judo, or Brazilian jiu-jitsu. You need that grappling aspect because UFC is becoming part of the popular culture. And as more and more people watch the UFC, more and more people will use what they're seeing on TV. And
Yeah,
so they're going to go for a sloppy double leg, even though they're not a wrestler. They're going to go, if you end up on the mount, let's say you both trip and tumble to the ground, they're going to go for the mount. They're going to go for
right.
side control because they're listening to that all the time now, or whenever they're watching these matches, they're listening to Joe Rogan, or one of the other announcers saying, "Yeah, you see how he's moving to the mount here? Oh yeah," and so it's going to be part of people's way of fighting. So any modern day martial artist, they need to add grappling to their
Yeah.
repertoire.
Or they'll put you in they may not know what to do from the guard, but they'll put you in it because they've seen UFC
Mhm.
fighters. They've seen Conor McGregor or whoever on TV do it, right? So
Right.
they at least have a general understanding of hierarchy of positions. Um,
Hmm.
if you're a UFC fan, if you're an MMA fan, you at least even if you don't know how to do an armbar, like you know what's a good position, what's a bad position to be in, right?
Right.
Um,
Exactly.
so. Let's talk about some of the negatives, right? Because I think every martial art, even the best ones, have negatives associated with them.
Of course, of course. Let's look at the glaring one that all the traditional martial arts poke fun at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is that it is a sport based, and like what you said, after a blue belt, it gets even more sport based, And so that could be something that is a negative. You know, if somebody hasn't thought of it, right? So maybe they're on the ground, they go for this ankle lock, and somebody comes up and kicks them in the back of the head.
Yeah.
You know, that's just something that they never thought of, but it was something that worked in the gym. So I think it's important to be able to separate what is the sport base and what is the uh, I guess street combat level base, the self defense base there, and like what you were saying, Evan. You know, if you're a white belt, if you're a blue belt, you have more than enough skills to survive on the street. You just need to figure out which skill is applicable and when to use it.
Yeah. A side note, I training combatives, we essentially we do almost no leg and foot stuff because again, we're the ultimate goal is to prepare for combat and you don't want to be attacking legs when someone can just stomp on your face. So we tend not to do that. And the new gym I started training at, a lot of sportive guys there, which is cool. I like their level of competition, like we talked about on the last podcast. But the first couple times I went, people were just eating up my legs because I just wasn't used to it. People like people just like, oh, I'm just giving them my legs, and they're just ankle locking me left and right. And I was like, damn it! Like the first most of my taps since I've been there have been leg attacks. I was like,
Oh wow,
um,
wow,
because I'm
yeah.
a little less used to defending it. I don't train them very often, so I don't necessarily, like a good way to understand how to counter something is know how to do it to someone. Um,
Hmm.
and because I don't train it that often, I've been taught a little bit, but I don't train it that often. So I don't instinctively, I'm not like, all right, when I'm in this position, I pull my heel in close and I roll to this side, not that side. Like it hasn't quite sunk in yet for me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, you know, being sport based might limit your I guess limit your experience as well as limit what you're focused on when you might have to use this on the street. So that would be a negative of modern day Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. What do you have, Evan?
So another one of the negatives I would say is it's the same critique we had for other traditional arts not incorporating grappling is a grappling art, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, not incorporating any striking at least in most places I've seen where I remember training with a couple of colored belts from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at the Combatives gym, and we're like, oh, we're gonna go over some striking stuff. And I was like, oh yeah, everyone knows how to throw punches. And then these guys who were different colored Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu belts went to throw a punch, and I was like, what is that? That's not like that looks terrible. Like, what do you do? I thought you were like a trained martial artist, So they did the opposite, right? They've thrown away any sort of striking training, which I think is a good skill to have.
I
Again,
agree. Along with like weapon skills like FMA
yeah.
or even firearms and things like that too. If you want to be well-rounded modern day martial artist, yeah, definitely you got to know how to strike.
Yeah. Yeah. All right,
All right.
back over to you.
Yeah, I would say, you know, as I age, even for people who haven't aged, injuries, because we can train at 100%, there is potential for injuries. I think through my journey, I've had shoulder injuries. I've dislocated my finger. I've blown out my meniscus and my knee. Uh, so there's going to be injuries that will set you back as well as cause some depression because anytime an athlete gets injured, you know, there's some of that mental thing that happens that it's depressing, it's sad as well too. So injuries.
Yeah. Side note, if I remember, I'm gonna drop a link in the show notes down below. My former medic wrote an article about like the some of the psychological benefits of like training combatives slash Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'll drop that in the links down below, so check that out. Um, Another negative, I would say is we kind of touched on it a little bit, but like it gets you too comfortable with being on the ground. Like
Mm.
if you like a lot of a lot of depending on what gym you go to, sometimes they start standing, sometimes they start kneeling. Um, but a lot of people get very comfortable being on their back on the ground, which in a real world street fight or a combative, like a wartime situation is, I mean, that's not where you want to be. You don't want to be on the ground like ever, right? So,
Absolutely. And that's where we have an anti-grappling program, to kind of address that too. As a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt myself, the ground is the last place I want to be. And I think learning to grapple so that you know how to counter grappling and also how to get off the ground onto your feet. That's an important skill to always keep in mind, no matter what your belt level is or your level of experience.
yeah, when I uh one of the units I was in, the Sayak Kali guys came and actually did like a week-long training thing with us. And at the time, like yeah, this is 20, let's see, 2012-ish. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was, gaining in popularity, pretty big. And everyone's like, "Oh, well, that's the solution to everything. It's just the solution to fighting is just Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu." And I remember them coming in and being like, "All right, we're gonna show you guys using Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu essentially in bar fights and in street fights." And like, they would go to the ground. One guy would get dominant position, and then like some dude's buddy would come in and like punch him in the back of the head, or like like
Mhm.
roundhouse kick him in the face, or they would just dogpile the guy. So it wasn't in a vacuum or in a cage, it might be really good, right? Because you're isolated and
Right.
other people can't get involved.
Yes.
But when you start getting into streets and there's, it might be other people can jump in and uh you know, and people, I feel like when you watch CCTV videos, people are more bold when you're on the ground, right? Because it's hard for you to like turn and punch them. Versus
Mm.
when you're standing up and striking, people tend to keep their distance because they're like, well, I don't want to go in there and get punched in the face. But if you're already on the ground, they feel a little more brave all of a sudden.
Absolutely. Yep. I agree 100%. And one last negative might be that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it can be pretty expensive.
Mm,
These gyms, the monthly payments, membership fees, it can be expensive. So before, you could find like places that they would train in the garage, but now it's a little bit harder. I know traditional martial arts, it might be easier to find like garage training, backyard training, someone just teaching in the park, and they might not charge you anything. But nowadays with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it can be expensive.
yeah, it's a business like anything else. So
Mhm.
yeah. Trying to think of like another big thing I find as a negative. Honestly, I'm a huge fan. Even though said it's not, no martial art is perfect, and uh, depending on where you are in your life and what your goals are, um, may determine how long or how much or if you do it at all, right? Each different style, but
Right.
I think spending some time like we were talking about grappling is an important part of anyone's martial skill set that they should have. So
I agree. And like what you mentioned as well, too, it's a great workout. You make some friends and it's fun.
yeah. What else? Any other kind of closing thoughts that we need for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
I would just say if you're consider yourself a modern day martial artist, you've got to have that in your bag of tricks.
Yeah. No, I thought of one more negative. Um, as a new person, I feel like it's very overwhelming and very complicated. Um,
Mm.
because I just remember coming to the gym as a new Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner and just getting my butt kicked like over and over again. Like
Mhm.
every class, you're like, I'm just getting smashed there. And then they're teaching moves, and the moves, depending on the gym, like they may go over it once, or that may be a theme for the week. And if they're moving around too quickly and you're not even familiar with the basic positions, just understanding like a basic move seems very complicated. And then by the time you like start to learn something about it, you're already on to the next move. And then when they come back to it, you're like, I don't even remember what this is called. Like I just oh the thing where I stick my leg by his chest and kick his knee, like you don't necessarily know the move, so it feels overwhelming compared to like when I first started taking striking classes. It was like, well, here's a cross, here's a jab, here's a cross, here's a hook, here's an uppercut, and you can kick and knee, and there's a couple different types of kicks and stuff like that, and
Hmm.
the punches, you can change the position of your hand, but at the end of the day, you're still using very similar body mechanics to throw the punch, or throw the strike. So, um,
Absolutely. I think we all can relate. If you do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's like trying to take a sip of water from a fire hydrant.
yeah.
Yeah,
And then if you look
it's just
online, it only makes it worse because people are doing all sorts of crazy stuff. They're like
yes.
rolling upside down and like
Yeah,
back take from a position. The guy looks like he's about to lose, and then he like somehow rolls and takes the guy's back, and you're like, what was that?
right. Right.
So,
So I just really quick on what you were talking about, the overwhelming feeling that you get. So many techniques, so many moves, so many positions. And on top of that, you got somebody smashing you while you're trying to do all this. It's rough. It's rough. And you could turn that into a positive. And a couple things with that, with the positive portion of that. One, there's a lot of techniques, there's a lot to learn, and so it's great for brain health. It's
mm,
literally like human chess, where the chess pieces continue to evolve. In other words, just because you had your pawn and it could only move forward and back, later on it's actually doing some circles. So your chess pieces are changing, and so that's always causes growth, and that growth is, I believe, good for the brain. And the second thing is the ego. Getting smashed all the time, and just getting humbled day after day, that really helps to keep your ego in check. And that's
I
why
agree. Yeah.
many Brazilian jiu-jitsu, I wouldn't say all of them, because I've met some people who are a little arrogant, but many remember their days of getting smashed. And so they're aware of that, of their ego. And also, if you compete, there's very few people out there who are constantly just winning all the time. Very few Gordon Ryans out there. Most people, they've had their setbacks. They've had their losses. So that creates a lot of humbleness, and
Yeah.
that really teaches us to keep our ego in check as well too.
I think that's good not only for martial artists but for life in general. Just I think everyone's ego needs a good hit now and then
Mhm.
just to, keep
Mhm.
you humble, keep you kind, right? Just like the
Absolutely.
Tiga Tactics motto there. All right. Any other final things we need to say about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu before we start wrapping this up?
No, no. If you haven't tried it yet, go try it. You're gonna meet some really cool people there. I'm pretty sure of it. I can't speak for every gym, but every gym I've been in, super cool people.
Yeah, I agree. When we were in combatives, we traveled around to a couple of different Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gyms. So and there was there's three gyms right outside the base. So I had friends. I went to one, but obviously I had friends at the other two. And then when we were traveling around for combatives, we visited a bunch in Kansas City, and they were all cool. And
Hmm.
the ones where I train in Boston now, the people there were super cool too. When I
Right.
came in, so every gym has its own slightly different personality, but I've enjoyed every one I've been to. Um, so just my 2 cents. All right, we're gonna start wrapping it up. Since I got you on the podcast, and this is a timely news story. Did you watch the Jake Paul Mike Tyson fight? Because I feel like everyone needs to
Oh
watch this fight.
yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Yes, I did watch it.
Some
My
what
my in
I'm sure we can go into a whole episode, but give me a couple of wave top thoughts here before we
Okay,
close
yeah,
it out.
I'll go, and then I'd love to get your take on it as well too. I thought it was okay. I was a little disappointed in the way things shook out, of course. Also disappointed in Netflix, all the buffering and everything,
Oh
that
yeah,
the issues I had online. But beyond that, I consider it a win for Mike Tyson. He was 58 years old, and he lasted 8 2-minute rounds. Solid
Solid,
effort
yeah.
on his part, and all my respect to him. So I thought he had a big win, and that $20 million sure didn't hurt.
That did not hurt. No.
That didn't hurt. So I consider it big win for him. What did you think of it?
Yeah, similar, it was the Rocky Balboa movie, like the last Rocky. It was the real life version of it, right? I mean, Rocky hadn't been in the ring for who knows how many years, and he goes in and puts up a fight and loses by decision in the movie. It was literally the script of Rocky Balboa.
That's
Um,
right. Yeah, I didn't
I
think of that.
Yeah, I liked seeing, I played Punch Out growing up. I so Mike Tyson's made some bad choices in his life, but it was, he was the first boxer I remember hearing his name. So it was
Right.
cool as an adult to see him in the ring. It was cool that it was free on Netflix. So my kids stayed up and watched a little bit of it. They didn't watch the whole thing. I thought Mike looked really good for the first two rounds. And
Hmm.
whether again, whether it was scripted or partially scripted or it was, Jake Paul looked like he was a little bit scared those first two rounds, and then Mike's gas tank ran out essentially. So age is a factor, and
Right.
I can try to dislike, like my gut reaction is to dislike Jake Paul, but you have to respect him as a businessman because
Right.
he has take like he is not a championship level boxer, and he has all of these famous fighters calling him out because they know he's a giant payday. And like we were talking about, everything's a business. Genius
Hmm.
businessman, right? Like you, yeah, you can hate on him all you want, but at the end of the day, I mean, he's gotten a lot of people paid. He's made a lot of money, and I don't know. In the circles I run in, no one even talks about boxing. Everyone talks about MMA, and the fact
Same.
that he has pulled boxing more into the spotlight, and like even just having those two women as the undercard, which was
Hmm.
like legitimately a good fight. Uh,
Yes.
although I think they messed it up by giving the decision to the wrong person. I think that may have backfired. Because when
Hmm.
I watch it and I was like, now when I after watching that fight, I was like, oh, what a great fight. And then they're like, and the winner is not Serrano, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but the other girl. I was like, well, now it looks like boxing's fixed. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I felt
I
like
thought
that
the same.
backfired a little bit, but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, there's all sorts of breakdowns online of, and I don't think it's a stretch to say Jake Paul at the end was going easy on him, like because he wanted to stretch it out the full length.
Hmm.
Um, whether that was the plan all along or that was the plan that developed partially through, different story. But
Right.
I think towards the end he was definitely going easy on him. So it was cool to watch. Like I said, I like seeing Mike in the ring.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it was a great weekend if you were into martial arts and fights. UFC followed that Saturday right afterwards, and John Jones had a big uh, knockout, if you will, with spinning heel
Back
kick
kick, yeah,
to,
yeah, that
yeah,
was.
to the spleen right there, and that was quite the fight there too.
Yeah, I didn't. I did not pay for that, so I did not. I caught the highlight reel afterwards, which was cool. But- All right, final shout outs we need to give, plugs we need to make for upcoming courses, etc.
All right. Well, our pan course is out and it's running full steam. If you're considering using improvised tools to protect yourself with, a pan makes a solid choice, and this translates very easily to flashlights and just anything that you hold in your hand, whether that's a stapler or I mean a staple or anything like that. So check out our pan course. It's reasonably priced. Also, check out Evan's book, The Run If You Can, Destroy If You Must book as well too. It's out there on Amazon. Yeah, I think you can get it on both paperback as well as the digital copy. Christmas is right around the corner, so arm your loved ones with some solid knowledge to protect themselves with.
Yeah, I agree. And like we talked about, you should have a little bit of training in every range, right? So if you don't know how to use a small impact weapon, EDC pen course would be a great option to get you on that track. And again, I agree with picking up my book. Obviously, I wrote it. I like it. Patrick, the other co-founder of Tiga Tactics, wrote the forward, and
Hmm.
then I just kind of finished the first draft of a different book I have coming out that I sent over to Conrad, who's going to write the forward of that one. So I'm excited about that as well. But that one's still months away from coming out. So please pick up Run If You Can, Destroy If You Must now, and check out the Patreon link if you want more short course content, short info content that I'm pushing out on a daily basis. So
Yeah, there's a lot of content there. I think I recently posted more videos than you can shake a stick at.
you did post. That was today. And there's more coming. I just have it stacked up. I have it stacked up essentially daily through the end of the year. And
Cool.
then obviously I'm just gonna continue to produce little pieces here and there, but um, it's for $10, $5 or $10 to get access. It is worth it. And if you do the
Worth it.
$10, you get a patch as well. You stick around for a month.
I
So
got my patch. Thanks for sending that over.
no problem. No problem. All right. Keep an eye on Tiga Tactics website where they're going to be pushing out the info for next year as well at some point. So,
Right.
and then also, I wrote a bunch of articles for Tiga Tactics, and Patrick's going to start putting them up on the website. So check that out
Very
too.
cool.
All right. We will catch you all in the next episode.
All right. Take care out there.